You started out,
in Grand Forks.
oh yeah, but that was what they call you, a ranger's assistant.
Yeah.
That was in the 1930s,
Yeah,
late 1930s.
Yeah.
Then in 1943, you went to Nakusp as patrolman for the summer.
That's right.
And then in 1944, in April, you wrote your assistant ranger's exam and you were taken on as an assistant ranger in Nakusp. And then you stayed in Nakusp, went to ranger school, January of 1949, from January till April, and then back to Nakusp for the summer, and then September 49 till April 1950 with a 2-week break at Christmas, and then you were posted to Arrowhead as ranger in May of 1950.
Barbara, how do you do it?
Oh, I told you I was involved. In 1951 you were transferred back to Nakusp as ranger, and you were there until 1955, and then you were transferred down here as ranger in charge, and you retired officially at the end of February 1980. That little plaque they gave you that said you were the last ranger at Castlegar. Okay.
That's the history.
So you were at Castlegar for a long time, 56 until 80?
55 until, yeah, it was about 25 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, 24 and a half years, yeah.
Yeah, 24 and a half years.
August 55 until February 1980.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Arrowhead, that was quite a posting.
Oh, that was lovely. That was lovely. There was 32 families there, and they were all related except us. And we came in, and they weren't very happy to see us, but they were very happy to see our Cocker Spaniel because all the dogs up there were related.
It was some new blood.
Oh, it was wonderful in Arrowhead. It was
Yes, it was all right.
Wonderful.
The only thing that was bad about Arrowhead was the mosquitoes. A lot of mosquitoes.
Nearly all traveling by water.
Yeah, a boat. Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Was there a mill at Arrowhead then?
A mill?
Still?
At, what was the...
Sidmouth.
Oh, yeah, there, as you went
And
over
Trout
the river.
Lake.
And Trout Lake.
Trout Lake.
Yeah, there was one there, because that was in the Arrowhead district.
When he first went, I don't know whether this means anything, but when he was first working in Nakusp, the Nakusp district took in Trout Lake, Arrowhead, up to Sidmouth,
Yes,
and down to Broadwater on the Arrow Lakes.
yeah.
It was a huge district.
Oh,
They
wow.
split it into 3 in, well, must have been about 1946, 47, something
Yeah,
like
something
that.
like that, yeah.
Yeah. And when you first came here, this took in Slocan City, Fruitvale,
Yeah,
Salmo, right down to the American border and up to Broadwater.
yeah.
Yeah, it was big. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll leave, you know.
No,
but I
you
can-
don't have to, dear, because you're just doing fine, because I could have never
There's a lot,
remembered all
well,
that.
I remember dates, yes.
Yeah, you're good on that kind of
Okay.
stuff, and not me.
Okay.
My brain's addled.
What was the yearly cycle, the seasons of being a forest ranger like? How did it?
Don't look at me, I didn't work there. Well, you know, in the wintertime it was management, and in the summertime it was operations.
Yeah, that's what it was. Well, it was both in the summertime, but more, what we called operations, fighting fire and trail work and all that kind of stuff.
Did you have a telephone system for communicating with lookouts and that?
Radio,
Radio.
yeah, radio. Two-way radios.
Where were your lookouts from Nakusp?
In Sentinel Mountain, that was the only one I had.
Saddle Mountain, yeah, that
Yeah.
was the only one.
Yeah, that's the only one I had.
And you had radio
Yes.
contact with them?
Yeah, I had radio contact.
I guess the radios didn't always work, did they?
They weren't too bad, actually, Peter. It was, no, they worked pretty good. Oh, they'd go on the Hummer. But they had a man in Nelson anytime your radio went on the Hummer, especially in the summertime, but they didn't worry about winter, because we sent all our field ones into the district office. I mean, in the wintertime to be serviced and all this kind of stuff. And then they'd come back in the spring, sort of. but it was all handled in the head office in Nelson. I mean, with our radios, with the exception of the office radio, the big radio that was on the power, like, I mean, they weren't batteries on those, but the other ones, all the portables were all battery on it,
And you all had radios in your car, or you had a radio in your car.
yeah. So we were always in contact with somebody, either my staff that, or I could get right through to Nelson if it was out in the field. And well, that's kind of the highlights on the radios and how we got by that way.
The lookout in Arrowhead was Sprout Mountain, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, up in Arrowhead when I
And
was up
the
there.
house that we lived in is now under, I don't know how many feet of water. You know.
See, they flooded the Arrowhead.
Yeah.
And then when we were in Arrowhead, that we'd go to Trout Lake. See, that was in our area too. Yeah, we always had. Well, it was boat, and then they had a half-ton truck which we would leave at the wharf, sort of deal. And so we always had. If I had to get into Trout Lake or any of the creeks or anything in that area. So, but we were always. We're pretty much always in contact. I mean, with our portable radios with it. So, but I guess our biggest fire was the one on Sentinel Mountain, wasn't it?
You mean Sentinel?
Sentinel Mountain.
Oh, I don't know you. I think that one in Nakusp, that year that Gary was a year old, that was fire practically surrounding Nakusp.
Oh,
That was
that's
the
right.
year that you sent us out of Nakusp because there was a danger of the.
Right, you are.
It was the St. Leon fire and the
Yeah.
one across the lake. I forget what they called it. The one across Big Ledge? No.
Yeah, that's right. You go up on
That
Big
was-
Ledge.
That was yeah. And you didn't have.
Yeah, well, that was in the Pinson Creek area and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And there
Good, I'm getting good. I remember.
Sure, you can remember. You just have to be prodded a little bit. There were no water bombers or anything in those days.
No.
And you set up the bomber base here, didn't you?
Yeah.
Used to
Here
come
at
under
Castlegar.
you, yeah.
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 So.
That was when they had those lovely Avengers.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever see those water bombers, the Avengers? Oh, they were torpedo bombers in
Yeah.
the Second World War, and they were absolutely marvelous.
Oh,
Those
yeah.
pilots were just,
Oh yeah.
they were really something.
They're just out of this world, and they could get into spots where the bigger ones couldn't get in, you know. And as she said, these pilots, oh, they were just out of this world.
Yeah.
I mean, God, they went in places and we didn't even think they'd go in. But they'd always say, well, we'll try it. But they always came back, yeah, we made it.
When they came back to the airport, they used to buzz the house.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, here.
I used to worry myself sick about them. No, this is a long time ago. We were young and then, weren't we? That's, gosh, 30 years ago anyway.
Yeah.
But when they came in, we're right on the flight path anyway, and they would buzz the house.
Yeah.
We were out in the yard, they'd waggle the wings, and nice young fellas.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, some of them were older than we were, but that was all right. We were still young.
So anyway.
But Sentinel was the biggest one you had here. That was in 1967.
Yeah, up
That
on
was-
Sentinel, that's where our lookout was, right up on this
And
big hill right
Bulldog?
behind us here.
And Bulldog, and what was the other?
Oh, yeah, Bulldog,
You had another one, didn't you?
up in Ralston.
Old Glory.
Old Glory.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
we had that one,
1967, the year of the Sentinel fire, that was quite a year because that was Canada's centennial year. You had 99 fires. I remember that because you just prayed the CPR would start a little one alongside the tracks out of Blueberry or something, so it would be 100.
We didn't get 100,
No.
we just got 99.
99.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that wasn't really the worst year. The worst year that you had was the year that the Sons of Freedom were
We're
lighting fires all over, and that one up at Gander Creek and Goose
Yeah.
Creek. I remember that.
Yeah,
That's the year the suppression crew got cut off.
yeah.
Yeah, being in the Forest Service is not as glamorous as everybody thinks it is. It can be very, very dangerous.
And it's well, I guess you'd call it nerve-wracking too, and long hours. I mean, in the summertime, there were really long hours, and of course I was
You were like,
I was over anxious myself.
most of
I
the
mean, the other
rangers-
guys, well, yeah, it's a fire sort of deal, but I'm right in there with both feet sort of deal. And anything that came up, I was on it right now. I didn't muck around at all.
He used to come home at 1 o'clock in the morning during a bad fire season, and he'd be down at the office again at 5 in the morning. That would go on
Yeah.
some years for weeks if we had a very, very dry, hot summer, and if the Sons of Freedom were on the rampage.
Yeah,
Light fires, 3 or 4 fires at the same time. No water bombers in those days.
no.
It was all hiking in, wasn't it?
Did you have a system of trails that you made
Yes.
for access?
Yes, up the main creeks where there was no roads or anything like that. And to go to Old Glory, well, they never had a road up to Old Glory. That was their lookout. And there was a big long trail there. And a fellow from Rossland, you used to do the packing, bring in all the supplies and everything. Wilf Lassie Gibbard. She's up getting good.
You just have to be prodded a little bit. You've got a lot stored in that mind of yours that you don't know is there.
Yeah, so, no, it was a good life. In a way, it was, I mean, in the winter, of course, it wasn't as much. The summertime, cripes, as she said, she'd hardly ever see me.
In the winter, you were cruising?
Yeah, cruising timber and doing inspections. Of the timber sales and what the MTIs. Now that was private lots that people that owned, and I don't know what the MTI stands for. I mean, that's what we used to call them anyway. They were all private stuff, but we had to go in and inspect them for slash and to see how they were doing in there with their roads and everything, and they weren't actually making a mess and having a hazard. If it was, well, we just gave them instructions that they had to clean it up by a certain date, sort of deal. So, it was a big area, actually. I mean, a heck of a big area, because we had. We had what do we call it? The boat, the big gray boat.
Oh, the landing barge.
The landing barge. And then we could put a truck on that, or a half-ton truck on it if we were going up some of the logging roads up the lake, sort of deal.
That was an LCI, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You weren't alive during the war, but that was called Landing Craft Infantry. That carried the infantrymen up on the beach on D-Day, and they let the front down and all the men got off.
Yeah.
That's what the firefighters did too.
Yeah.
You had 3 of them on the lake, didn't you?
Well,
One here and one in Nakusp and one in Arrowhead.
yeah. So actually, I started out when I was a kid in Grand Forks. I mean, during the summer, I don't know what you'd call me,
Ranger's
busboy.
assistant.
Yeah, something like that, ranger's assistant. I was more on the radio and that kind of stuff. And what else is there?
I don't know, he's the one that's asking questions.
One of the big changes while you were a ranger in this area was the coming in of Castlegar. How did that affect operations in the Arrow Lakes?
That came in when we were in Nakusp. Well, and as a matter of fact, they started negotiating in 1950 when we were in Arrowhead.
Yeah, that's right too.
What's the name of that fellow? He ended up in
It was well formed when I came down, or when I got transferred to Castlegar. It was well formed, and they had these big areas that we have to inspect. So, tree farm license, what they call it, TFL. And then up around Rossland area, there was a lot of private stuff up there, MTIs. Now, don't ask me what the MTI stand for. It was just, but there were private stuff, and we had to go out and we had to do inspections for slash and hazard and all this kind of stuff.
Were those actually old mining, these craft?
Well, yes. Yeah, there was a lot of them that were old mining areas. Pardon me. Up in the Rossland area. Then we went right over the over the hill down into Big Sheep Creek, and then the fellows from the Grand Forks. Well, I was on to that. I was like they joined on with them.
But how did things change when the Castlegar pulp mill came in?
Not too much, because see, they handle pretty much everything themselves, and they had foresters and all this stuff. We'd go out after they'd been out, or go out with them just to check how things are and everything. And then if they hadn't cleaned up an area, slash or something, well, we'd have to give them instructions, and you'd write it out and on lot so and so or whatever it was, and you give them a date for it. You know, that they had to have it done in 15 days, 10 days, or a month, or whatever it was, depending on how big the area was.
But they were quite a very large organization compared to anything that you would have dealt with.
Oh yeah, that was the biggest. Yeah, it was really big. Yeah. Well, they took all the Arrow Lakes, right, cleaned up the Arrowhead.
Yeah, from where?
From Edgewood.
No, down farther this way, wasn't it, from about Broadwater? Was there any of the TFL in your area down here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it would be below Broadwater.
Yeah, it would have to go down to Broadwater. Yeah. That's up from
Deer Park?
Yeah, Deer Park.
Did the local other smaller sawmills and contractors object to that?
Well, they beefed a lot about it, I mean, all their operation was as legal as you can get it, sort of deal. So they didn't. I mean, they just hollered because they could see that they were losing a lot of good timber. Yeah, that idea, sort of deal. But and we had, let's see, there was Haddikins and Pete Wilson and Castlegar.
Bill Waldy.
Huh?
Bill Waldy.
Oh yeah, Waldy. He was in on it.
Dick Nelson. George Mary.
Oh yeah. All those are operators that were in the area, sort of. And then they had what they call the MTI, which was private stuff, like up around Roslyn. There was a lot of fellas up there that owned claims up there that had timber on. Well, they'd come in and say they wanted to cut the timber on it, and well, they had to get a timber mark for it, and then all the stuff had to be scaled and all this kind of stuff. So it was all right. A heck of a lot of long hours. Anyway, that's why I got gray hair and old. But that's kind of the highlights. What it was in a short period, in a way. I mean, I covered a lot of ground, but I don't know if there's any special things that you are interested in or would like to know about. I don't know.
Well, I'm interested in the beginning, the use of aircraft. Someone said that there was an aircraft which operated out of Nelson originally.
Yes, it was a Beaver. It could not like it used to come up the Arrow Lakes, and then it could land on the lake, sort of deal. And when I was in Arrowhead, they'd come up to Arrowhead and land there and tie up at the wharf.
Was that a junker?
No, the junker was one that was on ground, sort of deal. But they were the Beavers, what they call the Beavers, and they had floats on them. They could carry about 5 people, I think.
I don't know. That was Bob Baker, wasn't it? Wasn't it Baker, and then Thompson that flew it?
No, they were They're Thompson and Baker and that were on the landing craft and the boats and everything.
No. There was a fellow who used to fly into Arrowhead and eat chocolate cake with Ted Young when Ted was assistant DF, and his name was Thompson.
Oh yeah, Thompson. Well, he was a pilot.
Yes, and then there was Baker. He was the
pilot. Yeah, he was a pilot.
Yeah, of the Beavers. Yeah.
Yeah.
The part of your job as being wife of the ranger was to serve chocolate cake?
Well, no, it was to remember what everybody liked, because the assistant DF hated chocolate cake. And when we were in Arrowhead, the boat just came in, the Minto came in twice a week, and they would generally come up on the Minto if they were coming. And the assistant DF didn't like chocolate cake, and the pilot of the aircraft just loved it. And they always had lunch or supper or whatever with us when they came in, and so it was just trying to remember who liked what, I was very young in those days and very nervous. It was his first posting as a ranger, and you had these people dropping in from all over the place, and
But you did a good job, dear.
yeah, I was a good cook, I have to admit that.
They would come visiting from Nelson.
Yeah.
You had a ranger supervisor?
Yes. Yeah.
Harold Holmberg.
Yeah, Harold Holmberg
In
was
there,
then
in
too,
there.
and then at the end it was Stillwell. Les.
Yeah, but you had Jim McDonald,
Oh yeah.
Ole Kettleson,
Yeah.
Al Larson,
Yeah.
and Les Stillwell, and Glenn Allen. Glenn was your supervisor for a
Yeah.
while. Yeah. Yeah. And then there was the Forest Protection Officer, the one they used to call the Fire Inspector. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Harold Holmberg.
And Percy Young.
Yeah. First, yeah.
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 And the father of that gal whose husband owned the Crown Point Grill, Armson. What was Buddy Armson's dad's name? He was in it too.
Bunny Armson's dad?
Yep. And Robinson, Jim Robinson,
Oh yeah, Jim Robinson. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was supervisor.
and Fire Inspector
Yeah.
for a while.
Or yeah, fire inspector. That's it.
So okay.
So, it was interesting, but long hours.
Did you not get most of this from Joe Killo?
I did. He told, but I don't think he worked, well, he didn't, I'm interested a little bit in what the Nakusp Arrowhead.
Oh
area.
yes.
Yeah, he was down here, yeah. Well, his head office at the start when he started down here was up at Roslyn.
Mhm.
Before they had the Ranger District was down here at Castlegar.
Yeah.
Were you busy with the timber cruising up there in Nakusp and Arrowhead?
Oh yeah.
So where were the mills then?
Well, there was one at Nakusp. There was one at what was that outside of Arrowhead? Just on the river there.
Sidmo.
Yeah, Sidmo.
In
Yeah.
Nakusp there was one at Arrow Park.
Yeah, but they were small. They were just half a dozen men sort of deal.
What about poles?
Poles, Bell Pole, Kearney, and there was a lot of poles came out of that district up there, up in all the creeks up there, Pinkston Creek, St. Leon. What were some of the other? Let's see, Caribou was down at Burton. Yeah, it's the only ones I can think of right now.
Arrow Lake, Cedar Pole. That was
Oh yes, Arrow Lake Seal,
Yeah,
that was Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little bit about what would happen if the mill owner would come in and ask you to cruise in a particular area? Then what would you
Well, all they do is that they come in and then make an application. Then the ranger would send it to the district office to be cleared and find out if there was any private timber on the area. And then we'd get a clearance back.
Would that application have all the bearings and would the area be?
Well, it was done by a map. It was just squared out on a map, so many chains. It was all done by chains. And they would come in with, and there was an application form, and they had these little maps that you could draw what they wanted on it. And then it'd go to the district office, and they in turn would send it to Victoria for clearance to find out if there's any private timber on it. And then they would give it a number like timber sale X 54321 sort of deal. And then that was known as that until it was all finished. I mean, it had the same number.
You had to have an auction sale, didn't you?
Oh yeah, auction sales like
For the
that.
After the
sale.
clearance came back, then what was the next step for you?
We'd have to go out and cruise it, find out what the timber, how much timber, and then we make up an appraisal on it, and a rough sketch of where the roads would go, sort of deal.
How would you mark out the area so that when they
Blazed it. Yeah, we'd go out and have to blaze it, see if we'd find a post, I mean, to make it legal. And that took a lot of time. Some of them were falling down, half of them were rotten, they'd been there so damn long, and we'd hunting for these damn posts.
survey posts?
Yeah, survey posts.
What would they be from?
Well, I guess when in the old days or way back that they had to have these lots all laid out and everything like that, I guess people applied for them or something way back. That was way back before my time, I don't know. And they were given a number, like TFL. No, not TFL.
Oh,
that's-
STL,
Yeah. TL. STL. Yeah.
Special Timber License.
That's it.
So there were some of those old marks scattered around.
Oh yes. Up in the Arrow Lakes, yes. Yeah.
Were some of those still owned?
Oh yes, there was. There was. Now, like B.J. Carney, I don't know how long they had them, but B.J. Carney owned some lots up the lake, and Warren Larson. What the hell was it?
So what could
Arrow
they?
Lake Cedar Pole. That was on.
And they could do what they wanted on those, pretty much.
Yes, but we had to keep an eye on them. We'd go out and check them and everything for fire hazard or whether they were cleaning up their slash and all this kind of stuff, piling it, and in the fall burn it and all this. So we have to make sure of that. And what we did, we just made out what they call a hazard report, a certain area, and then send in a map with it.
So you'd use some of those old locations to start your
Cruise
line
or
around.
line, yeah. So, what else is that?
After you worked out the value, you would advertise the bid.
Oh, yes.
Did people actually bid on?
Oh, yes. I mean, if it was a good area, and was handy and everything, that. But there wasn't that much. There was at the start, years back. But after it got going where everybody could settle in now, like, well, you could say B.J. Carney, they were a pole company, and Bell Pole, they were that. They pretty well stayed in, but every once in a while they'd get cranky and they'd start bidding against each other, and the old stubbers would really go up on it.
So was there a bit of a gentleman's agreement about territory?
Well, yes, in a way. Yeah, I would put it that way. That's a good way to put it. That not like Bell Pole went in at Arrow Park, and they went all up the creeks up in there, Caribou Creek, and no. Yeah, see, Pinkston was on the Arrow Lake, so it'd be on the Arrow, and that was B.J. Carney. They were poles, and so was Bell Pole, and they would get that. And then if there was any timber on it, sometimes they took the timber, but very seldom. And then they'd be re-advertised, and it had been cruised on, for the saw logs and everything, and then they would have an auction sale on it.
When it was re-advertised for the saw logs, was that Bell Pole advertising the saw logs?
No.
Or was that the Forest Service?
No, it'd be somebody that had applied for it. It could have been a logger that applied for it after they'd taken all the poles off, see, because they were just interested in poles. They weren't interested in the saw logs at all. They'd just take out the poles. And then, as I say, it may lay idle for 6 months or whatever it was. And then they were getting short of timber, so they'd go in and take a look at it, and then come in and make application for the saw logs on it.
So you could make application for a specific thing.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, it all because they all had to be cleared. See, we had to get a clearance for them, and that would have been done in Victoria, sort of deal. And
what was an auction like?
well, we'll just say that there was 2 or 3 operators that were interested in it. They'd advertised it in the paper. So many. Well, when I first started, I was all board feet, but then at the end it was cubic. I mean, they changed over from board to cubic, and it'd be advertised for. Well, it depended how big it was. If it was a big area and everything, it'd take a month advertising or something like that. And there'd be these guys, or these operators, I'll call them. They went in and they went all over it themselves to see if they were interested in it and all this kind of stuff, see what the road condition was, or the roads that they would have to put in, I should have said. What how, if it was steep or rocky or whatever sort of deal. And then they'd go up for auction. Not too much fighting back and forth on it, because guys had picked out their areas and they had worked in it, either taking the poles out on it or something on it. So, well, we had some where there was a lot of words about it and everything, and then you get an auction sale, and you get maybe 3 operators in there, and they're so much on the fir, so much on the pine, and the poles and everything else. And then there'd be a few words, and some of them would get hot and going, and then there a guy would throw up his paper and walk out the running door.
But one of those people that was sitting there would have been the one who made the original application.
Not in most cases, okay, I'll say it that way. But if it got up over his what he could handle, he just had to back out of it, because he just couldn't afford to do it. It'd be a smaller operator, and a bigger operator would come along, like BJ Carney for poles and Bell Pole Company, and then you'd have a small operator with just a small mill sort of deal. And he just get, well, it wasn't a big area, but he was mostly solids, not poles. But if there was any poles on it, he made a deal with either Carney's or Bell's or something like that, and he would make the poles and everything, and then they'd haul them up, sort of deal. They all had to be scaled, of course, so we know exactly what was coming off the area and everything, and so that's the way it worked.
Most of the time, did the person who made the application get the bid?
I would say yes. Yes, pretty much all the time. Every once in a while you'd get a couple of guys that got it in for one another, and then they'd start bidding and I mean, really go at each other, we might say. But that didn't happen very often. I mean, everybody tried to stay in their own area, sort of deal. But it was always advertised. Well, all of them had to be advertised, even though there may be 4 people interested in it. They'd come to the auction sale, and the chap that, and they'd have what they call the upset price, that we had said that, okay, it's, well, I mean, in those days, way back there, it was in board feet. Now it's cubic, of course. So they would say, here it is. Well, they would have it on a paper, I mean, on their tender, sort of deal, what was there. And then the ranger or whoever, if it was a big sale or something like that, well, somebody from the district office in Nelson would come out and handle it. But the ranger, on a normal one, he would handle it himself.
How many feet was a big sale?
100,000. No, not cubic. I mean, those days it was FPM.
So $1 million.
Yeah.
1 million board feet.
Yeah. So, but if it was in a good area and everything, I mean, I had 2 or 3 whilst I was up in the Nakusp area there. That boy, they really went at each other. Pretty had to have a bloody PV in there to keep them apart, sort of. Yeah. Banging the old gavel on the table. But if we were pretty sure it was a fairly big area, and we were sure that we were going to have a lot of opposition on it, somebody from the district office would come out and take the sale. And then I would, because it's hard on the ranger sort of deal. He's got to work with these guys, and if you can get one of the guys come out from Nelson to handle it, you're out of it and everything, and then after they'd gone there, and then you'd hear about it.
Did they ever argue about the upset price with you? I mean, did they ever tell you that you...
Well, sometime, but not too much. I mean, once it was set, it was pretty hard to do anything unless it was something where it was outstanding or something like that was all haywire sort of deal, which I can't remember any actually. Then they may have to redo it over again. But
you would have had to estimate their logging costs?
Yes. See, actually the district office, actually, they took care of that, because they would get all these in sort of deal, and then they'd average them out sort of deal. And then we could tell just about if it was a real tough operation, say steep side hill, lots of rock and everything, then we would allow more in the appraisal for the logging or for putting in roads and all this kind of stuff. So it was all done that way.
That calls for a great deal of judgment then.
Oh yes, oh yes, there were a lot of judgment in this. I mean, in the timber sales, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of the highlights of it, really. And then if you want to go in the summertime, well, that's the fire season, and we had lots of those. That I mean, up in Nakusp, there, old Sentinel Mountain, that's where our lookout was up in there. That wet. Oh brother.
Did the lookout burn?
Just see, we had a tower there. No, it didn't burn, but it got right up to it, and we had a guard around it, all that kind of stuff. But it was very interesting, very interesting. I enjoyed it. I actually started out in Grand Forks as, I don't know, I was pretty young. I was still in school, worked in the office in the summertime sort of deal, and taking phone calls and all that. And
why did you decide to join the Forest Service?
why? No, I think I was approached on it. It was because I was interested in the field, getting out in the field and hiking and all this kind of stuff. I was really interested in it, and I knew the chaps quite well. I was 18 or something when I went, and I hang around down at their office a lot, sort of deal. Okay, you'll go to get this, get that, get this, and then put me on a payroll. Sort of deal. That's how I really got started on it. But I was never up on a lookout. I spent a few days when I was young, in Grand Forks, but I actually never was up on a lookout to spot fires or anything like that, unless we got a call in if there was a road to it, and so we'd get up with our aft gun sort of deal. So Arrowhead was quite a different thing. It was on the lake sort of deal. There were a lot of boat work on the lake to get into Sentinel Mountain and into Trout Lake and all this kind of stuff. So we were tied up a lot with boats up in there when we had power. And then we had a landing barge, what they call a landing barge.
So you had a launch on the upper lake as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh
they
yeah.
had one on Kootenai Lake called the Amabilis.
That's right.
Did they have one like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, do you remember what it was called? What was it like? Can you describe it to me?
It was an open boat. Oh, wait a minute now. We had those little tubs. The hell were they called? Barb? Yeah? Can you help me out, please? She's got a memory. Hey, what were those boats called that we had outside of the landing craft? Those little white with a cabin on it.
One was the one you had in Nakusp was called the Aspen. They were
Aspen, yeah, that's
they
it.
were used
Inboards.
Yes, they were used for patrolling during the Second World War in the Georgia Strait.
Yeah, that's right. And then the Forest Service bought them or something.
Yes, they were launches. They were nice.
Yeah, they were 16-footers.
Yes.
And they had a little cabin on them.
Did you run them yourself?
Oh yeah, yeah. And then we had a landing barge, and we had a man running that.
Then you had the river boats.
Oh yeah,
like the Blue Ox.
Yeah, the Blue Ox.
That was about a 20,
open.
Yeah, about a 22-footer in shape, very much like a canoe, wasn't it?
Well, yes, in a way, but
narrower
it was
than an outboard.
Yeah.
Where did you use those?
On the Arrow Lakes, and if we get a call and we had to take some men up, say half a dozen men or something like that, well, we used the Blue Ox, what we call the Blue Ox. Sort of, it was gray, really. And then we could put all their food supplies and everything in and take them up and then drop them off and up the lake sort of deal. So
they were used a lot up in the Big Bend country. Now that's up where the Mica Dam is now, where the Columbia River bends and where the river was very swift. They used those river boats up there, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. But that wasn't in my district. That was in actually Arrowhead I guess Revelstoke. Yeah, Revelstoke.
Yeah.
But they weren't very good on the Arrow Lakes then, were they, those river boats?
They were slow.
Yeah.
They weren't very good
Pain in the ankle.
when we moved to Arrowhead from the Nakusp. They moved all our furniture on the landing barge, And we went up in the Blue Ox, the riverboat.
Yeah.
Hugo and myself and our 2 little kids and a cat and a dog. 36 miles in there.
Yeah, it was up there. Yeah.
That was a long way.
Well, those were the days, you know. They were really, really the days.
They
Long.
used to have storms on the Arrow Lake that would bring the landing craft to a dead halt. When
Yeah.
the wave went over, it would just shudder and stop.
Yeah,
And then it would start going again. Yes, those were the days.
yeah. Those were
And
really.
you had open boats too. You had
Oh, yeah.
ordinary outboards.
Yeah.
Did the weather tie you up sometimes when you were out cruising and trying to get back?
Yeah.
Tell them about the time. Tell them about the time your boat got away from you and you were rescued by the fellow with the plane. Do you remember that?
Where was
That
that?
was in Nakusp and you were out
Up the lake?
up the lake and you got caught in that terrible storm and you pulled the outboard up on the
Beach?
shore.
Sure.
And Bill Waldy used to own a sawmill here, Waldy Brothers Sawmill. He sold out to Castlegar when they first came in and started up their sawmill. And he was in a plane flying up the lake and they saw the 3 fires on the beach. 3 fires meant a problem. And they also saw the boat floating down the lake. and so they landed the plane,
Yeah,
and
they did.
hooked onto the boat and brought it back into shore. I don't think Bill Waldy has ever let you forget that, has he? That was many years. Oh, that was a long time. Yes, there were many nights that the assistant ranger's wife and I were walking up and down on the beach after a terrible storm, waiting for the lights of the boat to come around the bend.
Yeah, up there at Nakusp there on the
Those
point.
storms were terrible, just terrible.
Good cotton, I got a lot
Oh
of
boy,
them.
I tell you, nerve-wracking. It was no fun being a ranger's wife, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Lots of sleepless nights and worries, and
So actually, it was
it was an extremely interesting life, and you
35
would never
years
have done
of it.
anything else.
Yeah, 35 years. But the wives, they had their, well, not problems, but they were left alone a heck of a lot in the summertime.
Well, yes, and we were, although nobody ever said it, and I'm sure Joe Killow would have told you the same thing because his wife would have gone through the same thing, but we were expected, you know, to take messages and relay them, and people on a weekend, instead of phoning the office, if there was a fire, would phone here. And if, you know, I mean, we had to take down all the information and then locate whoever was available and get them down to the office or you know,
Get
locate
organized,
them,
yeah.
either an assistant ranger or the dispatcher or somebody, and get them going. And people would get very, very upset if they phoned here and the line was busy. One day, I forget how many fires, and I took the chair and put it under the telephone and I just sat there. It was on a weekend, and I answered one phone call after another and writing everything down, and then I guess I must have been on the phone anyway off and on for about an hour, one phone call after another. Then a fellow phoned and he really tore a strip off me and told me that if I wouldn't stay gabbing on the phone all day that I could, you know, take the information about this fire that was burning, and I hung up on him. And I got a phone call from well, I hadn't been gabbing on the phone anyway, it was a private phone, but the Forest Service didn't pay for it. And then I got a phone call from his supervisor in Nelson, and he asked me what I thought I was doing, hanging up on somebody who was reporting the fire, so I hung up on him too. And then I complained to him, and he got in touch with the supervisor, and the supervisor phoned me and apologized. And I said, if you expect me to be an unpaid secretary, you know, I don't have to spend all my days sitting under the telephone. But that's about what it was like in the summertime. Any old-time ranger's wife can tell you that, you know, it was fun. I have to admit it. It was really an exciting, scary life, but it was fun. Particularly in this area right around here, more around Castlegar than around in any of the other districts, because this was where the Sons of Freedom were rampaging, and they didn't at that time didn't seem to care who they might hurt. There was quite a fire on. I found out about this a long time after it happened, but there was quite a fire going on the other side of Sentinel Mountain, I think at Goose Creek. And he was
Yeah,
up,
Goose Creek, yeah.
he was up in the helicopter, I believe, and he saw the fellow lighting the fire, and he was lighting the fire between where the base camp was and where the suppression crew, who were a bunch of young 17 and 18-year-old boys, spotted this fellow from the helicopter lighting the fire. The base camp was down below, and the suppression crew was working what they call now initial attack on a fire up above. And the fire, with the wind and everything, got going, and the suppression crew was cut off. And they landed the helicopter, and he took his a half-ton truck and drove through that fire to the suppression crew and brought every one of them out safely. He didn't say one word to me, but those kids and him could all have been killed. But that was the kind of thing that went on here for 5 or 6 or 7 years, every summer.
Yeah.
And at that time, of course, the Forest Service got called out for any house fires or anything like that outside of the city limits. And the year they burned the villages over in Otoshania, they had the Forest Service over there, and the Sons of Freedom were very, very militant at that time. And he went over the next day. He'd been out all night. He went over the next day, and he took us, the family, with him, and our big German Shepherd. And at that time, the Forest Service fellows wore uniforms, and they were very similar. The shirt and the tie were very similar to the RCMP. And I think if we hadn't had our dog with us that day, that they would have turned our car over. You know, they came up very close, and I rolled down the window and got Smokey to put his head out, and they all backed off. Of course, when I told him to bark, he barked. He didn't know what he was barking at, but he barked anyway, and we managed to get through. As I say, exciting times. It's the unfortunate part now is that the Forest Service is not the integral part of the community that it used to be. In any town, the Forest Service was always extremely visible, and everybody knew who the ranger in charge was, and the assistant rangers and the hours. They knew everything about them. 3 years after Hugo retired, I got a phone call from Kaminko now, from their fire department. They worked very closely together, and this fellow phoned me up, phoned one Sunday and wanted to know where he was, and I said, he's out golfing. He said, well, what's he golfing for? We've got a big fire going up on our property up in Warfield. And I started to laugh. And I laughed, and he said, ma'am, this isn't funny, you know. We've got a fire going. I said, yes, it is funny. He retired 3 years ago. But they didn't know who was in charge here. They had no idea of anything. So I told them to phone the Nelson office or the Zenith number to report a fire. They weren't very pleased about that. But I've heard a lot of people say it's unfortunate that the Forest Service is not
the same as they were.
But it's
altogether different now.
Yes, of course.
Did you feel that as a ranger? What did your place in the community?
Pardon?
Did you feel that as the ranger that you had that special place in the community?
Oh yeah, we did.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
Not so much me, but you.
Yes.
Yes, in Arrowhead and Nakusp, and I know that the fellows in Salmo and Caslo and Lardo, Grand Forks, the Forest Service was a very big part of the community. Mm-hmm. People called on them for help for all sorts of things. We're looking from looking for lost kids to people that were lost on the lake, or house fires, or information or advice. I mean, he still gets called occasionally for advice on how to take down a tree or whether or not it's got disease or whatever. But they don't.
After 9 years.
They don't seem to phone the Forest Service for. It's entirely changed now. This reorganization. There are no more forest rangers. BC is the only place, I think, in the world that has forests. It doesn't have forest rangers.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
Because
it's altogether different now. It's
I'm glad you retired. You'd go bananas.
I'd go right up the wall.
Yeah.
But the old times, sure, we put in long hours and everything like that, and
low pay.
Yeah, low pay and all.
Was it hard to raise a family?
Well, if you talk to our family, to our sons, they say no. We found with the pay being on the lower end of the scale when you work for the government, and no overtime and that sort of thing.
No overtime pay, you mean?
No overtime pay, yes. Yes, we were like an awful lot of young people, particularly nowadays. We lived from payday to payday. I mean, we waited 15 years for a car and 12 years for a vacuum cleaner and all sorts of things like that. But looking back now, if you talk to our sons, and I mean, they've both got extremely responsible jobs and good positions. They don't think they went without a thing. We felt that they were going without things, but they think they had a wonderful life, you know. And both of them worked for the Forest Service in the summertime. Gary, when he was going to university, worked in inventory up north, and Alan worked the year of the terrible fires, 1967. I remember that. That's the year that Don was killed in Kelly Creek in the aircraft.
Oh, Don Thompson.
Yes. No, the pilot, Marion Somerville's husband, the pilot of the Avenger. The Avenger that went down in Kelly Creek. Do you remember that? Alan worked for the Forest Service servicing the airport. He was just about 17 or 18, and when he was in Caslow, when he was with the bank up in Caslow, he worked evenings and weekends working the radio for the Forest Service up there free, just because they were so interested in it. And yet neither one of them went in for forestry.
No.
But no, it was, I wouldn't change it. You know, I mean, I spent lots of lonely hours and spent an awful lot of time worrying and that sort of thing, but I wouldn't have had him working anywhere else. It was a very interesting life, and he was extremely happy in his job, and even though the pay was low and that sort of thing, we got by all right, didn't we?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I was in it all the time. I was in right after my ruddy nick in it. I didn't slough off at all. In fact, I suppose I did more than I really
Yes.
had to, actually.
Yes.
I got so into it and enjoyed it so much and everything, you know, that I just really wrapped right up in it, sort of deal.
Particularly
She
in
spent
the
a heck
summer.
of a lot of time by herself, too.
Well,
and the
it's something
kids.
you
Yeah,
have to
kids.
adjust to. You either adjust to it or you spend your time being extremely unhappy, and I wasn't going to spend my time being unhappy. What the heck? I mean, that was what you wanted to do, and so you did it.
Yeah.
And I raised the kids in the summertime.
Did you?
No, go ahead.
One of the developments more recently has been in management, sustained yield development. The rangers would have a tremendous amount of practical knowledge about what was going on in their own district.
Oh, yes, yes.
How did that information, or how was the ranger able to pass that on into the larger district? And
Well, it's all these darn reports that we wrote out. Pretty everything was, we had, I don't know how many, we had about 4 or 5 filing cabinets and everything else and all this stuff. And then we had a manual sort of deal, and we'd have to go by that. So all the rangers were doing the same thing sort of deal. And well, it depends. The chap that was in charge, some this should be off the record probably, but some didn't put everything into it. I'm not just saying this because I did. I put everything but my toenails into it all the time. That was my life sort of deal. I don't know how she put up with me all
That
all
was
the time.
easy.
Yeah.
did you get together with other rangers at all? Did you see much of the rangers in the rest of the region?
Only maybe once a year or something like that. When we had the ranger meeting, it'd be a 3-day affair at the head office in Nelson. But we did have a supervisor, and he kept us in on everything. Like he'd have maybe 5 rangers under his charge, and he'd be traveling around, say the Arrow Lake sort of deal. We'd start down here at Castlegar, and then go to Edgewood, and then Nakusp, and then Arrowhead, and then maybe Revelstoke. That would be his area sort of deal. So we found out what they were doing through our supervisor. He was the one that told us what was going on, sort of, because we were generally so darn busy putting in such long hours that we had enough of taking care of our own area rather than worrying about somebody else's.
Were there some policies that you saw that needed to be changed, such as policies on cutting, harvesting, the amount that was harvested, or the way that operations were carried out in order to protect the forest or to manage it properly?
Well, that came really from the head office sort of deal. We had these circular letters come out, and we had to go by that sort of deal. But if we went into an area and we said, well, it should be clear cut, or it should be.
Yo, don't you dare say those words.
Why?
Clear cut. Oh.
Why? Yeah, but that was a long time ago, dear. She's got this thing down pat. Okay. But just saying that. But no, we had these meetings, and then, as I say, that we had a supervisor that maybe he had 4 or 5 rangers under him, sort of deal. So we knew what was going on, like on the Arrowhead. Let's say here, I was at the bottom, sort of deal, and then you go up the lake, and there was Edgewood and Nakusp and Arrowhead, sort of. So there was 4 rangers, like on the Arrow Lakes, and then there'd be a chap that would be in charge of the 4 rangers, and he'd come out and see that everything was being done right, or if we weren't doing something that we were supposed to, we get hauled up for it. So that's. So that's.
But you did. You used to talk a lot about when logging wasn't being carried on, and I can remember there were lots of times that you.
Well, I let off steam at home because I couldn't.
You let off steam to your supervisor too.
Oh yeah, I was supervisor.
Supervisor used to come out here for supper usually, and I would be in on what they. Well, I wouldn't be in on, but I'd hear what they were saying. It was pretty hard not to. But I know you used to get upset with some of the logging practices.
Oh yeah.
And try very hard to change them, but.
What were the kinds of practices that would get you upset?
Well, going into an area that I didn't think was old enough to cut or something like that, it would be not immature, but it would be just on the balance that it should have waited what I thought would be another 5 years sort of deal before they cut it. This kind of thing, right?
But when they came in to apply for that area, could you turn them down because of that?
No, we had that was done by the district office. We just fill out the application form, and then we send it to the district office.
Did you make recommendations?
Oh yes. Oh yeah, we could do that, and that it shouldn't be cut, or the immature timber, or well, we even went as far as the roads. If you couldn't get a road into it, it'd be straight up and down, sort of. That'd be a goat to get into it. This kind of stuff, So it was.
And if they went in anyway, what would happen with the roads?
Well, they couldn't go in because they'd get nailed for it. They had to make application to, to put a road in. Mm-hmm. And if we said no, then if they did, well, if they cut down any timber or anything that they were billed for.
But if the district permitted them permitted a timber sale on a steep site where you didn't feel roads could be built safely, what?
Well, we would call in the supervisor or somebody like that, and then we'd get together and on it.
And the district office would overrule you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Why would they overrule you?
Can you turn that off a minute, and I'll tell you why they would overrule you.
And we had to put down our foot on it, or put our cork boots on, sort of deal. And then we'd have our supervisor come in, or the man that was handling the timber sales and the management part of it, like from the district office. Mm-hmm. And then we'd go out on the ground, and then we'd discuss it all and say, well, this area here, and then we should block this out, or it should be block cut or strip cut or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So that's,
A lot of the people I've talked to so far retired before there was any significant clear cutting, and couldn't tell me much about the how that came in.
gee whiz, I'm just trying to think of the fellows that,
Well, Joe Killo was.
oh, well, yes,
he went
because I
to-
took Joe's place.
And he went to scaling too, so he
Yes.
wasn't a ranger then.
That's right, yes, yeah, you're right there. So, but we had to, see, we got these letters out from the district, a circular letter laying out what you could do and what to do. Like, we'd have to go and examine the area that the fellow applied for, and we'd take an inky bar with us, what we call an inky bar, drill it and find out, and then count the rings on it to find out age and that, and then we could go back and say that it was immature, well, I mean, that kind of stuff. So the ranger did have some say in the matter. I mean, quite a bit of the say, sort of deal. But they make up rules and regulations at the head office, like in Nelson, Ireland, and we got these circular letters that it had to be a certain age and all this kind of stuff. So we'd have to, we were guided that way. We'll put it that way. So, it was a real life sort of deal. I mean, I'd do it again if I had to, if I was young, I think, because, it's changed so much now. They've got, well, how can I put it? Hi-hat, but it isn't that way. But I mean, it's so, what's the word I wonder, it's gotten so different. It isn't like the old days that the older rangers, I suppose I can class myself into an older ranger because I've been out 9 years now, but it's the head office would come up, or a head office in Victoria, say this area can't be cut because it isn't old enough, or something like that sort of deal. So we were guided that way. But I mean, the Rangers had a heck of a lot to say about how things were run in this district, sort of deal. Of course, we had to have supervisors and we had to have management in Nelson. Then in the summertime, we had what they called operation, and we had to have fellows out for helping us with the fires and come up like that. So. It was an interesting 35 years.
It was. I have to say that too, because, I mean, whole families got involved, and in those days, of course, everything that was said was held in absolute confidence. When he first became a ranger, he had worked for a ranger whose wife talked an awful lot, and I made up my mind when he became a ranger that I wasn't going to do that, and so I told him when he got his first posting that he wasn't to tell me anything, not anything. And the district forester told me that that was very wrong, that if he couldn't blow off steam to me and trust me not to go around talking about it, then I wasn't much of a wife. And so then he did, I kept secrets, well, not secrets, but I kept confidences for many, many years. Didn't I?
Yes, dear, you did.
Yeah.
You sure
But
did.
it was, I have to admit, it was a very good life. I don't know why anybody would want to do anything else,
Well,
really.
yeah, we were so involved in it, sort of deal.
We were
for
so young when you started.
35 years.
Yeah.
Sort of
But
deal. I'd do it again if I had to.
Yes, so would I. But in those days, the Forest Service was different. It was like a great big family. That's the only way you could explain it,
That's
wasn't
right.
it? It was like everybody helped everybody else, and everybody was ready to give advice if you needed it, and it was really the most marvelous organization. Often you hear the ones that are still with the Forest Service saying that it's so different now, that it's more or less gotten into a who cares idea. But Joe Killo could tell you, and,
Oh, yeah, Joe.
and Jack Raven in Nakusp. He was
Yeah.
the last ranger in Nakusp,
Yeah.
and of course there's no district at Arrowhead now, but But it was a very, very, as a matter of fact, I think it was the best department to work for in the government. The Forest Service
Yes,
they were
you said
very
that.
highly regarded, and I
Yeah.
think all of the people that we knew in the Forest Service were very decent, honorable, upright men, and extremely dependable and very, very dedicated.
Mhm.
They were all, well, you had to be to work in a job like that, but it was interesting. It really
Yeah,
was.
because actually our family life wasn't as full as it went, because good old me or bad old me or something, I put everything in it but my toenails. I practically lived down at the office in the summertime anyway, didn't I?
Yeah.
You didn't see very much of me.
No?
Well, forest firefighting must have been quite a part of the job, and you must have had a number of occasions or incidences related to forest firefighting, stories that fires and.
Well, I guess the one on Sentinel Mountain was a good one. The one out at Castlegar.
Oh, yeah. And then there was that one in Nakusp. I mean, there were several in Nakusp.
Oh yeah, the one on Sentinel.
On Saddle.
On Saddle.
And the St. Leon fire.
Yeah, same.
That was a bad one.
You also you'd have to send crews out into quite remote areas.
Oh yes,
after
Dad.
lightning strikes.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you keep track of them when they were way out in the backcountry?
Well, we always had a timekeeper, and we had a experienced man in charge of it, like a foreman sort of deal. And then we had what we call honorary fire wardens. They were there for the summers, and we generally had them in charge of the fire. If we had a whole bunch of fires, he'd be almost a Forest Service man. Really, that's the only way I can explain it, that he was an experienced man himself. And we had these honorary fire wardens, and they were older, and they knew what it was all about because they'd been fighting fire when they were young, sort of deal, and they came up through and some of them were didn't have jobs in the summertime and that, so we always called on them. We had our key man, sort of deal, and we used to make up what was it called? Organization chart, sort of deal. And where these men were and where we could get them. We had all the stuff right down on it. So that's what it was. It was a good, interesting 35 years. I know that. It's. But anyway.
When when he was in Nakusp and as an assistant ranger, and they would have to, you were talking about cruising, they would go away for 2 weeks at a time, not just go out and right back, but the district was so big that sometimes they would go, well, if you went to Arrowhead or Edgewood or down into Mosquito Creek or something, they'd be gone. The ranger and the assistant ranger would be gone for as much as 2 weeks at a time. And in summer when they had fires, he would be home every second day for half an hour at lunchtime. The rest of the time they were on the go, and that was before they had all the modern methods of firefighting.
Yeah.
Dropping them from helicopters, and they didn't have any water bombers.
Did you use pack horses to supply the fires?
Some of them, yes. Well, like up in Trout Lake, up in that area, sort of deal, where there wasn't any vehicles, or there'd be the odd vehicle or odd half-ton truck or something like that. But they did have pack horses, and down Edgewood more, I guess, than it was up in our district.
Yeah, I think so. I don't
But
remember. I know you used to service the lookouts with pack horses
oh yeah,
up in Nakusp. You did.
yeah.
Up on Sentinel Mountain.
Like all their food and everything was taken in there, and they'd be packed in whenever we figured they had to go up on the lookout, and they'd be up there 2 months, or well, depending on weather, 2 to 3 months up there, and then we'd have to set up a pack horse to pack them up for all their stuff out of there. So it was quite an interesting 35 years.
Well, yes, longer than that. Really, it was closer to 40. Yeah.
So I can't think of anything more. That's the highlights of it in a way, and